Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Catholic ReCon, testimonies from reverts and converts. I'm your host, Eddie Trask. This week's guest hails from Canada, and it's Carla Lynch, who is a convert to the faith. Carla, it is a blessing to have you here. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. I'm so excited to be here. So I'm
Well,
looking forward to share my story.
yeah, I can't wait to hear it. And specifically, I'm not going to give it away, but the date that you came into the church is very unorthodox, I suppose. I don't hear about it too often. We'll get into that, but very,
Mhm.
very special in my opinion. So, Carla, how did your faith journey begin?
Oh my. So my faith journey actually began as a little child. My parents actually, my dad was a fallen away Presbyterian. He comes from a very large English Scottish family, and which is really common in Canada. The Scottish are to Canada, like what the Irish are to America. We're a big ethnic group here, and especially in rural Ontario. So he was a fallen away Presbyterian. My mom wasn't particularly religious. They met in the late 70s and fell in love. And they, like, as non-practicing Protestants, had five children, which is pretty, like, what would you say? Like, pretty impressive, right? So I'm the baby of five kids. And actually, the town that I grew up in, how I started going to church was that the town I grew up in had a Black population, and our babysitter was from that community, very devout people. And we started going to Baptist church with them when I was a little girl. And so it was kind of an interesting looking back, like I never realized how unorthodox that was. I guess you could say that that was my first experience of church, a very charismatic, culturally kind of specific, like, faith experience, if you will. But to me, it was just church, and they were people that I loved. We lived really far from my mom and dad's family, and so they were kind of like our family, my babysitter's family. Very close with them. I ended up naming my son actually after her dad because we were very, very close. They truly were like grandparents to us, her parents. And then a few years into going to church with her, we had a big tragedy in our family. So I'm the youngest, and my oldest brother died suddenly in the middle of the summer. It was a crazy accident that happened, and at his funeral, the local Baptist pastor of another Baptist church in our town, he came and he invited my parents to church, and he spent a few months um, kind of developing a relationship with them. He apparently my brother had gone to youth group there or something like that. And so he really was dedicated to like kind of evangelizing my parents. I have a lot of respect for that pastor. He's passed away now, but he was a real evangelist. He loved people, and he was very fearless in the people that he would evangelize to, like to his great credit. So after a few months, my parents finally of excuse me, after a few months of developing a relationship with him, my parents brought us to church on Easter, or not Easter, excuse me, Christmas Eve. So Christmas Eve candlelight service at the Baptist church. And my mom and dad started to attend church there, and we all went along as the kids. Um, a few months later, my dad wanted to be rebaptized. That's obviously a big, in the Baptist tradition, they would say that once you believe, then you are baptized, right? So that's kind of the thing. If you say that you accept Jesus Christ, they want you to be baptized, and then you'll come into full membership with their church. And so my dad went back to be baptized. Excuse me, my dad went to the baptism classes to be baptized. He didn't want to go alone, and he brought me. And I sitting at the table, I still remember this. I was like 7, 8 years old, I think, and which is very unusual that they even let a kid that age attend those classes. It's typically something that they don't usually do baptism in those traditions until you're like, 12, 13, 14 years old. But I don't know why they let me come in with my dad. And they're going around the table asking everybody, like, when did you accept Jesus Christ? When did you say the sinner's prayer? And I'm like, trying to do the math in my head as a little kid. And I'm like, I never did that. And it's just like, I'm like, oh no, I missed this lesson at Sunday school. And I lied at the table, which is terrible to admit, but I did. I confessed that in my first confession. And I think I might have like, anyway, I just said like, yeah, I did, or whatever, because I could tell like I'm gonna get a bad reaction from these people if I don't say yes. And then later that night, I went home and like said the sinner's prayer in my little third grade vernacular or whatever. Um, and then they, again, very unusual, they let me be baptized a few months later. I got baptized at Easter of 2000 when I was 8 or 9 years old, 8 years old, excuse me. Um, and my from there it was that was a really special day. I don't want to take away from how special that day was, but I'm not sure that I really grasped it. Like at 8 years old, what could I really grasp? I don't know. And my meaning and kind of who I was as a person, I kind of tried to find that outside of faith. Like my church had just gone through a bit of a scandal right before we started attending church. It didn't have anything to do with the pastor that we were there with, but it was the previous pastor. And so because of that scandal, the new pastor was like left with a bit of a mess. And so slowly over time, all of the young family started to leave. And so there was no real peers for us in the church. And because of that, I think like I really strayed a lot from the faith. I was deeply sincere, like I really did believe in God, but I didn't really see that relationship as being a two-way street. And a lot of it just didn't make sense to me. I couldn't understand it in those times. And so my whole like identity, if you will, it was all in sports. It was in, peers at school. And that's kind of where I tried to like find or fit in, if you will, like the culture kind of pushed me along, so to speak. And that began to change. That went on for a while. And then when I went into high school, I was like full sports mode. My second year, very Canadian of me, I got a really bad shoulder injury playing hockey. I played on a lot of hockey teams, very stereotypical. And I just kind of like happenstance fell funny one day and I didn't know it and they didn't know it for a few years after that, but I had tore my rotator cuff really bad. And so I suffered with that for years. And it was kind of a big realization for me in the months after when my shoulder wasn't coming back that like this sports is not gonna do it for me. Um, and that was really hard because again, like I said, my identity was so rooted in that. Um, and my older sister, I have a sister who's about 18 months older than me. In this time, she started attending a local youth group at a charismatic church, and she invited me to come with her. And I went a few times while she was home. I went with her there, and I loved it. The people, it was nice to just be around people my age who were nice, like coming out of the, competitive sports. Everyone's very competitive. It can be very um like disingenuous, if you will. It's like you're good one minute, you're not the next kind of a thing. And it and it can also be a world where like socioeconomics are a huge part of it, like financial. If you're not rich and people can tell that you're not, then you're kind of on the outs. And I don't want to paint it with a broad brush, but that was just my experience. So it was nice to be in a place where people didn't really care about those kind of things. And I think maybe my guard was down a lot in those days, and I was able to kind of just receive the word of God like from them. It was a very simple message of the gospel, and it was very moving. And I felt like for the first time, I remember in those days, I was about, I think, 15 and a half when I started to be more serious about my faith. And finally like I could understand the Bible when I read it. I could remember before like the Bible just seemed like a different language. And then I would open it up and try to follow with the sermons, and I finally could. I felt like it's like they talk about the Holy Spirit like kind of enlightening the words of the scriptures, right? So they finally make sense to you. um and a few weeks into going to that youth group, my sister actually went on a big mission trip. So she was gone for the summer. She went to Australia on a big mission trip. And then I was by myself at home, and some of her friends from youth group invited me to go with them to on the mission trip to Montreal. And I had never really like traveled very much. especially not into Eastern Canada. So I'd never really been around like immersed in Catholic culture or anything like that. And obviously Quebec's a very like French Catholic place. Um, so that was kind of an interesting experience. And the second night that we were there, we did a big trip to St. Joseph's Oratory, which was built by he's now a Saint, St. Andre Bessette. At the time, he was still blessed. And I've never been in a Catholic church. And I can remember it's built into the side of Mount Royal. Have you ever been there
N-
to
n-
Montreal?
No, I'm smiling because the first recon episode is a buddy of mine that his whole life changed by because his parents visited the oratory. So,
Oh, that's so okay. Well,
yeah,
there you go.
yeah.
So, yeah, it definitely changed my life, that's for sure. And I can remember driving up and seeing the steps up and seeing people. I didn't know what was going on, but people were on their knees on the steps approaching the church. And then as we're walking up, I'm looking at the people and they're holding like prayer beads in their hand, but I didn't know what they were. Growing up Baptist and charismatic, I had no clue what they were doing. But obviously, like how they've built it is that if you say a prayer on each step going up to the oratory, you will have said the whole rosary.
Mm.
So it was like very intentional how they built it. And then they have like a big prayer garden with like outdoor stations of the cross. And I'll never forget the moment, kind of like stuck with me forever. But walking into the main part of the church, I had, again, never been in a Catholic church in my life. I was so moved by it. Like, just like from my recollection, like the stations of the cross carved into the marble, the like all the biblical accounts painted into the mosaics in the walls, like it was so stunning. And I had never seen a crucifix before in my whole life, which is so crazy. I was 15, I don't know. Um, and to my mom and dad's great credit, like they were not anti-Catholic. Like I don't remember like a lot of negativity. So for me going in there, I was kind of able to take it in for what it was. It was just them presenting the Bible to us, presenting the story of creation, of, God's redeeming love of Jesus. Like I was able to take that in. Like it wasn't a big deal to me. Like what's a big deal with a picture? What's a big deal with a statue? Like I had no concept that these were big issues for Protestants. And I just remember like the other kids and even the pastor was, I don't want to say like they were sneering or anything because they did enjoy it and they thought it was pretty, but it was definitely a sense of like, on a religious level, like a bit of disgust towards it, in the sense of like, we don't need all of this. This is like kind of a waste of time. Like that was the energy or like the way that they were expressing how they felt about it. Like, yes, it's pretty and it's nice, but there's no point to this kind of
Mm.
a thing, or this is useless. But I am like, I mean, oh my gosh, I was so moved by it all. Like, I could have stayed in there for hours. Like, I would have. I think we were there like maybe an hour and a half, and I wanted to stay way longer. Um, it was so deeply moving to me. I understood it's so funny. I understood like seeing the statues of Mary. I understood on a visceral, like deep level in that moment as a 15-year-old who knew nothing. Like I got what the church was trying to say to us about her. She's just our mom. Like, when you know something deep in your spirit, like I knew that they weren't worshiping her. That's very interesting to think about that. Like I just knew that. And so I just remember being so moved by that experience and so sad. I remember that, like, so sad that we didn't have all those pictures, that we didn't have the statues, we didn't have the beauty in our churches. I'm like, where is this like, why can't Baptists have this stuff? Like it just didn't sit right with me. And one thing I really took away from that experience as well was we went into the living quarters. They preserved the living quarters of St. Andre Bessette. And we went in there. And if you know anything about charismatics, we love miracles. It's our vibe, right? Like we love a good miracle. And that man is not short on miracles. It's like if you go into certain parts of that church, it's just like eyeglasses and splints and crutches of people that were healed by him. And it just fills entire hallways there. And that's like that's a good street cred to have with the Pentecostal. So I was like so impressed with him because they were very strong. The youth group I went to was very, very strong on like giving everything away for Jesus and being bold for him. And that, when we do follow Christ, miracles do happen in our lives. And I was just like, well, look at this guy. Like he really did something with his life, like such a humble, simple person. And that's very clear in his living quarters. He does not have a lot of things, but then he's accomplished so much for Christ. And you can't take that away from him, like it was just such an intense witness and with incredible evidence of the eyeglasses and the crutches and all the things that people have left, they're physically healed. So that was so moving to me. And I never, truly from the bottom of my heart, I never forgot it. Um, and it kind of sent me on this, what would end up being like a 15-year journey towards the Catholic Church of trying to figure out like, why are those churches so beautiful? What is that worship that those people are doing? And like, why are our churches so ugly? And why can't we have the beautiful statues? Like, what happened here? You know? Um, and so I remember coming home and I can't believe I did this, like just the innocence of a kid, I guess. But as soon as we got home, probably a week later, I sent my youth pastor an email saying, like, I think I want to be Catholic. Can't believe I did that. He was kind of open-minded. I just remember he said some nice things. The one thing I do that does stand out about it was just that he said, like, they believe like the typical kind of view that Protestants have, like they believe in faith and works for salvation, and you have to earn it, and you can lose salvation, and or wait, no, because that's not a point of contention, not to lose your salvation, sorry, but like you can lose your state of grace and these kind of things, and um so that kind of was like, okay, like maybe I won't do it. And it also felt very culturally foreign to me, especially growing up. Like it was very much my view, I guess you could say, of the differences between Catholicism and Protestantism was like more of a cultural thing. Like, oh, okay, like we're Scottish, so we're Presbyterian. It's just what we are, kind of a thing, And so it felt very culturally foreign to me. And I didn't know the first thing about like how to become Catholic, any of those things. So I just kind of like stuck with the tradition I was in for a while. And then the next year we went back to Montreal. Um, and um, that was a very moving experience. I had incredible, very, charismatic of me. I had incredible experiences with the Holy Spirit they were very real. Just of like God's like love towards me. And I could feel that like deeply in those experiences. Like people, not in a scary way, but like people that had no way of knowing things about me that knew them, like they could tell me like what was happening in my life and how I was feeling about myself and all these, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and some of the distance I might have felt with God or whatever, like they knew that and there was no way that they would have known. And just it was a really deep sense of like Jesus kind of confirming and or affirming his presence like with me that like God is real and I'm not going to doubt that. Um, which was also deeply forming because I think sometimes people um some of what I see, like even in Catholicism, maybe not so much, but in other traditions, like they kind of like sneer at charismatics in some ways of like, oh, you people are very what would you say, like infantile in your faith or
Mm.
childish or whatever. But I think from the bottom of my heart, like it's deeply sincere. You know what I mean? Like how charismatics express their faith. And I always feel like a little bit protective of Pentecostals sometimes, like even in Catholic circles where I'm like, no, they're not all crazy. Like, like I want to defend them. I'm like, it's a very biblical faith in some ways. Like, they don't have the whole truth, um but it's so close to Catholicism in so many ways. And I'm so deeply like grateful that I was formed there because that desire that was put in me in those very formative teenage years for like to have like to know that you have the abiding presence of God in your life. There's nothing like that desire. And it's been such a North Star for me in the ups and downs of like what it's meant to be an adult and the insanity that went on when I became Catholic. Um, in my life. So I'm so grateful for that. And I truly, from the bottom of my heart, I owe that youth pastor. I owe the people who gave their time as youth leaders. Like I owe them such an immense debt. Like I could never repay them for what they gave to me. They were unbelievable people. And they would just, yeah, they just spoke so much like positivity and encouragement over my life and always encouraging us like to read the scriptures and to know the Lord and to press into God. And they taught me so much about what it is to have like a living faith, and I'm so grateful to them, truly. Not a moment has been wasted, I'll tell you that much. Um, so moving on from that, about a year later, after I went back to Montreal, I had to do a project at school, and this is where Catholicism, like, and many of those questions, those more intellectual questions that Protestantism just couldn't answer for me. So I started to learn more about the history of Christianity. I did a project for school, like I said, and I had to watch the documentary version of Case for Christ. And one of the evidences that he gives, like for the historical claims of Jesus, like being real, is the explosion of Christianity in the ancient world. And so I was really curious about that. And so I started to like research like where did the apostles go? Even the ones that maybe it's not fully recorded, like where they went in the New Testament, or the ones who don't write at all in the New Testament, like Bartholomew and Andrew and those kind of people. And I was a little bit like perplexed at what I found, because I think coming from the low church traditions, like we don't get a lot of the historical like the his like Christian history, even like for the Reformation, especially if you're like from the non-denominational or the Assemblies of God world, like because those traditions are like I mean, if 100 years old, many of them are only like a couple decades old. And so I had really no concept of Christian history at all. And when I started to go back and learn, like, okay, where did Bartholomew go? Like, oh, he went and founded the Armenian church. Okay, what do Armenians do in church? Oh, wow, we're nothing like them. Like that was, and I kept finding that like down the line, like, okay, well, where did Mark go? Oh, he went and founded the Coptic tradition. Oh, we're nothing like them. And it was just that became very distressing to me, I suppose you could say. And then I wanted to trace, like, well, where did we come from as Protestants? Okay, like the Pentecostals, they kind of come out of various traditions. Like, obviously, there's Azusa Street, but then there's other charismatic traditions. And then the Baptists are from like the late 16th century, kind of. And then there's a whole bunch of different versions of them. And it was very strange to me. Like, if Martin Luther was like this great mythological man, why weren't we all Lutherans? Like that, I didn't get it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like the story just like the history wasn't lining up, and um it just made no sense. And I kind of let it make no sense for years because, like I said before, it just felt like a big foreign stretch. And then when you grow up, like learning kind of how to speak Protestant, so to speak, and you're given a concept of like, well, this is how the doctrine is. And you love these people and they love you, like the people who are teaching you, like you have no reason to question them. And that's just kind of so trying to get into that like Catholic or Orthodox frame of mind was really hard for me. Um, and but in this time I had a really like a deep love of missions. That was something that I really wanted to do with my life. And so I went to Bible college, which was kind of an interesting experience. I did a super quick course. It was like a one-term program that I did, and we did a whole bunch of different kinds of ministry. It was wonderful, but it was tough because many of the evangelical organizations that are out there doing the unbelievable work of, truly taking care of the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable people, especially here in Canada, I found them to be very, very theologically liberal, and I just didn't fit in there. Um, especially with my background, yeah, to the great credit of the Assemblies of God, like they're still very Orthodox, here in Canada, thank God. And so I had like good roots in the scriptures that I didn't want to become liberal. And I just saw there's many denominations here who have become liberal and they basically die within 3 or 4 decades of doing that, and it was just very unappealing to me. But I found one organization that I really liked, and while it was in the Philippines with a mission organization there, and I loved it. And so I arranged to go back, and I ended up serving 7 months as an Assemblies of God missionary in the very Catholic Philippines, and I loved it. But I'm not gonna lie, most of what I did was secretly talk to Catholics about their faith. Was all I wanted to do. Um, I did do like a lot of service there, but for the most part, I was just like so curious about their faith. Like it was because it looks so maybe because the aesthetic is so different than maybe Catholicism here in Canada. It's so culturally different, and because there's such an intense majority there as Catholics. So everything is like every single saint day is celebrated. They constantly have processions in their streets, and it was fascinating to me, but it was very like, whoa, this is so different. And it does like from from the outside, I guess you could say, as a Protestant, especially coming like way outside of any kind of Hispanic culture or anything like that, like to see like the singing to it, like with the processions and stuff like that, that can be a little bit like, um, what would be the word? Like just like, whoa, I don't know the word for it right now. Just like it's very culturally foreign, right?
Yeah.
So to us, especially Assemblies of God, like that looks like worship because we don't have any context for the differences. Um but yeah, I was very enamored with it even there because I remember, if I'm being completely honest, and I wasn't telling anybody this at the time, so people are going to watch this back and be like, whoa, she was very Catholic then. But like I just remember one of the things that really struck me and I found so beautiful was I really couldn't deny in many of my experiences that for whatever reason, like Catholics have really intense family values. And I thought I remember being so moved by that when I lived in the Philippines. The intensity of the family values was incredible. And I was so like again, like deeply moved by that. Like the sense of like the way they take care of each other and the intensity of like that like the structure of um the extended family. I was just like, this is so cool. And I really couldn't get away from the fact that, why is it like in the Protestant countries we're very individualistic, like, and it's kind of to our detriment in many ways. And many of us are really looking for that bigger family structure that the Catholics kind of they do it naturally. And I was so moved by that. It was very, very endearing to me. Um, but again, like it just I kind of chalked it up to like, well, like I can be ecumenical in this, right? Like
Mm.
we're all Christians, and I was always very defensive of Catholics in those days. I'm sure people were very alarmed by that, but I always was. Even though like I probably would have said, oh, I have my differences or what have you. But then, a few years later, everything kind of came to a head during COVID. So my life went like upside down during COVID. My oldest sister was hospitalized for an extended amount of time, and she had a 10-year-old and a brand new baby. And I got custody of her daughters while she was in the hospital. And that was the hardest time, I think, of my whole life. I had two little children, and then I got two more children, and they were children who came with a lot of special needs because of just everything they had been through, and then a little baby who's now separated from its mother. And then my husband isn't home a lot because he's a long haul truck driver, so it's me and four kids, and a lot of expectations from social workers and a lot of people around me. So It was the most stress I think I've ever had in my whole in my life. And during that time, I randomly came across a Catholic speaker on YouTube. I I have no clue how this person was even in my feed because they're supposed to feed you what you're watching, right? On the algorithm, they're telling you what to watch. Anyway, it came up and I watched the whole talk and I was like, he was very authoritative in the way that he spoke. And it was that must have been what got my attention. You know, like Assemblies of God, we like the like fiery, loud talkers, right? Speakers. So
Yeah.
he was like kind of given that energy. So I was willing to listen to him. And he made so many interesting points. And particularly the thing that really hooked me was when he made the point about the Reformation never stopping. It just keeps going and it breaks and it breaks and it breaks and it breaks. And I remembered that sadness that I felt after I had left the Catholic Church that like after we had visited the Catholic Church that first time. And it was just like, oh, yeah, like we never stop breaking. Why do we do that? You know, like why can't I think many Christians are, you know, especially as Catholics, like for me now, but like we all kind of grieve that lack of unity.
Yeah.
I think we do, you know, and it's in us. And I just remember that pang when he said that. It never stops. It never stops. And and he also made some interesting points about the Eucharist. And I was like, oh, that's like right from the Bible. That's interesting. I didn't know that that's kind of where that teaching comes from. Um, and so from there, I became very open-minded to and open to listening to Catholic content, I guess. And one big thing in that you're going to hear Catholic speakers, like spoiler alert, but if you ever are stressed out, everyone's going to tell you to pray the rosary, right? So that's what I'm thinking in my mind, right? I'm stressed out, I'm stressed out. And so all I hear is these different Catholic content creators and speakers saying, like, if you're stressed out, pray the rosary, pray the rosary, pray the rosary. So against my better Protestant judgment, I began to pray the rosary. And I would take like 20 minutes a day and like do it sometime in between my niece's nap schedule. And I would, you know, get a YouTube video and just pray along with it because I obviously didn't know it. And I mean, truly from the bottom of my heart, like, and I've had real experiences with the Holy Spirit. Like, it was the most, probably one of the most powerful but subtle experiences in my life. Like I was so overwhelmed, excuse me, like just with my life circumstances and the presence of Mary and the presence of Jesus in the rosary is like nothing else I've ever experienced. And just the meditation on God's word every day that you do in the rosary, if you're praying it how you're supposed to, like as a true meditative prayer, it was so moving for me. And from there, I became very docile to the teaching of the church and to really wanting to understand like who Mary is and who they say she is. Because I could see the clear evidence in my life, like she's more than what we make her out to be as Protestants. She's not just another one of us, you know? And I also really began to see the divinity of Jesus. It's not that I didn't sincerely believe it before, or that it certainly was taught in the churches that I went to, but sometimes, and were you non-denominational before? Is that your background?
Well, yeah, I was cradle Catholic and then ended up
Yeah.
mega church non-denominational. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, great place to be. But so my experience, like, I don't know if you had the same experience, but like it can be the divinity of Jesus can be very diminished sometimes in those lower Protestant. Not that they're trying to,
Sure.
but they make him a little bit too much like our pal. You know what I mean? Like, and
Hmm.
he is our friend. He's our friend, yes, but he is fully God. And so it wasn't until I began to pray the rosary that, for me anyway, like Mary really magnified the divinity of Jesus. And from seeing the magnific, like seeing him in his divinity, I was able to really truly appreciate like the level of condescension that Jesus made to come to us. And it was so like I just remember like having that moment of clarity of like the intensity of how far down he came to save us. It just, and I know they teach all this. I'm not saying that they don't teach that in Protestant churches or that that wouldn't be part of their doctrine, but I always struggled with like understanding Jesus and worshiping Jesus, which I that sounds nuts. I know it sounds crazy because I what like we were Christians, obviously we were Christians, but I because it was just so much like the Christology was so low in those churches and from the teaching I was listening to, I never fully could grasp it. But in the rosary, I was like I saw, like who he really is, like the second person of Trinity, like God Almighty. He is God. He could have had all the angels, rescue him in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he chose to go to the cross. It was just like so powerful because there were some other things taught in the Assemblies of God, because the teaching can be so fluid in those communities and the doctrine as well. And some of it would be like, Jesus didn't have like full access like to the angels when he was here on earth because he had fully given up divinity.
Ah,
And it's like, no, he never stopped being God. Like that's a heresy, guys. Like, but I mean, we wouldn't have known. I didn't know that, right? I'm just accepting whatever this person is teaching me, and they're doing their best with their tradition, right? Very, very cut off from, Christian history. And so as I began praying the rosary, I began to like want to read the catechism. So I picked up a catechism at a thrift store and I began reading it. And I remember I was on like a long drive and it kind of like hit me what the catechism was because I was very like, should I read it? Should I not? And I'm reading it and like I mean I've read church constitutions, I've read like faith declarations that you have to sign for mission organizations, for Bible college, all that stuff. And as I'm reading the catechism, I'm just like it's just how they understand the scriptures. When you're like reading the first couple paragraphs of it and you're just like that's what this is. They're explaining the scriptures to us just like a Bible study. And that's what it just like hit me like clear as day. So it's kind of like a childlike approach, I guess you could say, to it. Um, and I came across like the another big push for me of like I really need to go to church, like go to Catholic church is I came across Scott Hahn's his talk of the Lamb's Supper. I've read the book since, but the talk is online. And it was amazing because I had incredible anxiety as a kid and as an adult because of the rapture teaching in the Baptist movement, which was especially in the late 90s when my parents started to go to church in the early 2000s. That was dogma. Like, you don't even question it. There's many people still today from that tradition that you don't even question that. Like, if you don't believe the rapture, you don't believe the Bible, you know? And like talk about anxiety, like true anxiety as a kid. Like and I know lots of other people that they're still Protestants and everything, but like that like kind of stole parts of their childhood. Intense fear, not being able to sleep. Um, it's sometimes I laugh it off, but I want to like because I think sometimes Catholics kind of fall for that stuff. So I want to be really clear with people of like it's not that's a heresy. It's not real, and please don't teach it to your kids. You know what I mean? Like, let them read whatever book, okay, but like, let them know like the Left Behind series isn't real, and people aren't just gonna disappear one day. Because I truly can remember like when I say anxiety, like having full-blown nightmares as an adult
wow.
that like the world was ending and like lava was coming off of volcanoes and because again, like the way it was taught to us, it was dogma.
Ugh.
It's like, did you have that in your non-denominational church?
No, we not at that level. I mean, we
Oh,
heard
thank God.
whisperings, but yeah, I can imagine how intense that gets. Just end
Yeah.
times teaching, just constantly talking about end times. There are groups that are absolutely fixated with end times, and I can only imagine what that
Oh,
does to the psyche of many people. So,
I know. And it just And little kids, yeah. Like my parents were not like super wrapped up in it, but when you're a kid and you're like watching the Left Behind series and and people are like, "Oh, there's a war here." You know what that means, right? Like Jesus is coming back tomorrow. Like it's just so scary, right?
Yeah, yeah. Which is also, yeah, it's almost like whatever we are experiencing, that must be the end of the world. But when there
Exactly.
were 8 times as many wars, or you know,
I know.
8 times of famine in the past, that did not spell disaster for the entire world, but because we sense it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, that got me for some reason. I don't know
I
why.
know. No, it's
Yeah.
very true. And I like, yes, a deep anxiety as a kid about it. And so when I came across like Scott Hahn's talk on what the book of Revelation is actually about, that it's the Mass, it's and the type of genre, understanding the scriptures from their type of genre that they're writing, was so like, I just remember watching that and just being like, oh, like the weight as a kid just comes off of your shoulders, especially like during COVID when things are crazy and, like everything's shut down and there's wars and there's, all the stuff that was going on in that, 4 years. Uh, it, yeah, the anxiety was intense, but then I remember watching that and the Book of Revelation, it's just about the Mass. It's just about Jesus. It's about the God. It's a apocalyptic retelling of the Gospels,
Yes.
That's it. That's it, guys. Relax, okay? And so yeah, just the piece of that. And when he explained like the presence of God in the Eucharist, I was so moved by that, especially that's why I'm so grateful that I was charismatic before because that was what we wanted so much was the presence of God in our lives. But it can be so subjective in those. I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but for me it felt very subjective where you're like, is it was that the presence of God? Was that just a feeling? Was this the presence of God, or does that person truly have the gift of prophecy? Like, how do we test all this? I don't know. Um, but in the Eucharist, like he comes and it's objective. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to, kind of have the perfect enough, like, did we sing enough of the song over and over again? Not to be dismissive, but like, did we do this right? Did we do that right? Whatever. Like, no, like the priest consecrates the gifts and here he is. He's faithful to come. And that was like, after learning that, I was like a moth to a flame. Like, I just was like, I want to learn everything.
What was
Um,
that,
Sorry.
2022 by now? Is that where we are?
Um, the end, yeah, maybe middle of 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I, but I did not have the guts to reach out to anybody because I didn't know how to do it. And I think I had sent off a form and it didn't get answered because everything like in our diocese like really shut down during COVID. And then the second time it got answered, and she said we're still doing RCIA online, and so I started doing like this on Formed. It's like I can't remember what it's called now, but it's Dr. Ed's 3, and it's a series that he has, and it was honestly amazing. Like it's kind of like obviously the basics of the faith, but when you need as a Protestant, like when you need to like relearn the language of the faith, like it was kind of a very good like rudimentary like journey into that, so to speak. And also like when you need your Christology to come up a lot more than where it is, Dr. Edstream will really help you with that. So that was like awesome. And then I ended up switching my RCIA got a little bit delayed because I had to switch the family of parishes that I was with. Like I was with the bigger city and they said, no, like we'll move you here so that you're with like closer to where you live. Because I had sent the form to the wrong people because I didn't know how it all worked. Um, and then I started to do in-person RCIA, and that was honestly, it was awesome. By that point, I kind of knew, and then also growing up Protestant, like a lot of Bible too. So I like it was more community. like why I was in the
Yeah.
classes or what have you. But like I don't know, the lady that did my RCIA was like, you could probably teach this class now. That's kind of sad to me, but I don't know why we are, yeah, like I was just like very moved by everything. And like I remember reading, sorry, I'm like jumping around here, but like I remember reading like Humana Vitae in that time as well, and just being like blown away by what the Catholic belief on marriage is and on like the sanctity of physical intimacy and on life. And we didn't have that depth of teaching,
Yeah.
And I needed that desperately, like to understand what is marriage, what is a sacrament. That was so moving. And that was really when, like, so I kind of still attended our Assemblies of God Church while I was in RCIA for a little bit. And then I remember after I read Humana Vitae, that was when I was like, definitely can't go to church here anymore. I was in the nursery, helping out, like watching the babies, and I was chatting with a lady, and somehow we got on like the issue of family planning. And I said, oh, I'm very Catholic on that now. And I just saw her eyes like do this, I was like, oh. I tried to like walk it back a little bit and talk about something else. She's a really nice lady, but that was kind of when I knew like I don't really fit in here. And I really never, to be completely honest, I never really fit into Protestant communities. Like I just asked a lot of questions. And I could tell, especially in the Pentecostal, like the lower churches, like the intellectual questions are not always welcome. And it's not to say that they don't want to answer them. It's just like they don't really see why it's important a lot of
Sure.
times, right?
Yeah.
It's more of like I don't want to say a feel good culture, but it's like experiencing the Lord, like changing your life, like which is all super important things.
Hmm.
But um
Yeah. I totally
I
get what
had
you're saying. Totally.
yes,
It's like
yeah,
it almost feels like don't complicate it. It's really simple. Surrender to God.
yeah,
Enjoy his presence. Some good things, obviously live your life according to his will as you understand it. Things like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and because I can remember asking questions like, and this is kind of funny, but I remember like asking questions of like, okay, so can someone explain to me like the Armenians, like the Maronites in Lebanon, the different Orthodox groups, the St. Thomas Christians in India, the Coptics. I remember like listing all these things. And by this time, the people are like, trying not to go to sleep on me. But I'm like, can someone explain to me why these people who have been so, um, like cut off from the rest of the Christian world just by nature of geopolitics, like we've really not been able to get a lot of information in and out, say like the last 150 years, right, into those areas. Like, why is what they do so much like what Catholics do? Like if what we're doing as Protestants is like, reviving ancient Christianity from like, the shackles of Catholicism and all this stuff that got added onto it, why are these people who've been so isolated from everybody, why is what they're doing and what they've maintained so much closer to Catholicism? Could someone explain that to me? And I remember asking that question and like I was like persona non grata for asking that question, and they weren't trying to be harsh to me, but they're just like that's not important, like
I
it
was going to
just
say
was
that
like
that
that.
that that puts you just in a completely different space altogether to even be thinking about that compared to what they
Yeah,
would be
yeah,
thinking about, right? Because your eyes
for
were
sure.
opened and you're starting to ask. Like, that's such an excellent point, I have to admit.
Yeah, that
That
always got me.
yeah, all these ancient forms, they
Hmm.
should at some point look like, if you're returning to some stellar foundation, whether you're a restoration movement or not, a lot of
Hmm.
groups will say
Oh,
that. They'll use that language.
yeah,
Returning, we just want to get back to the roots, okay? Oriental Orthodoxy, Coptic Orthodoxy,
I
the
know.
Syro-Malabar, like you said, St. Thomas.
Hmm.
You would think that there'd be some nice parallel there if that is,
Something.
yeah, something.
Yes.
It's
They
such a great
don't.
point.
I
Yeah.
know. I'm like, why don't if icons are evil? Why do these people do it? Why are the ancient churches? I remember watching when I was becoming like really interested in Catholicism in during COVID. I remember watching a documentary on the Coptics, and they had just found they were excavating a church that they had found underground that was from the third century, I think, or the fourth century, and it's built like, like any modern day Orthodox churches, like within the round and everything. And it's as they're like excavating the walls, everything is covered in icons, everything. And it was built in the memory of Saint Barnabas. And I'm going, I
Wow.
just remember that got me. I'm like, why? Okay, like what are we going back to as Protestants
That,
then?
that,
These people are doing this from this is the fourth century,
wow.
and it's that developed. It like that would have to be a pretty heavily developed doctrine for it to
I
be on your church walls.
absolutely. And
And
I
that
have
just
to, I just have to reiterate what you just said. You've made many great points. What are we going back to? What are we returning to? Which form?
yeah.
How ancient do you want to get?
And
Go to the catacombs and
I know,
go go to
thank
Justin
you.
Martyr at that point.
I
Go,
know.
oh my goodness.
It just
Sorry. You
no,
were,
it's so true though. Like,
yeah.
but that is like, thank you, because that's like my thing that like I have to say like big shout out to like the Eastern Catholics because those were the people that they really that faith, that persistence under the face of unreal
Yes.
persecution.
Something we
And
don't
the
even
main,
understand. Yep.
not even a little bit. We cry about the silliest stuff compared to what they deal with. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Uh, first
And
world
so,
problems. Yeah.
first world problems, big time. And hey, I'm at the leader of the pack of the first world problems.
Me too. Yeah.
But yeah, like it just that always got me for years. And so like as I was like approaching like receiving the Eucharist for the first time, I don't know why, and I have to share this, but I don't know why the sacrament of baptism never connected, like that was a sacrament. I had
Mm.
done so much reading. I don't know why, but I remember I was watching like Ed Suri's his Symbolon, that's what it's called, his Symbolon series, and they spoke about the sacraments and that they're real. And then he said, well, baptism, it makes a mark on your soul. And I had remembered in that moment, I remembered my baptism at age 8, and I didn't really think it was a thing. I'm like, nah, whatever. Um, and there was always kind of that thing of like, well, if it didn't take that time, you can just do it again, like that sort of approach in the like kind of low church Protestant world. But I just remembered like my eyes were like just open. It was like a touch of the Holy Spirit in that moment, listening to that teaching because I'm gonna get emotional talking about it, but I just remembered like as an 8-year-old, that little, like that was God choosing me, in that moment. That wasn't, yeah, like I'm so grateful for, I'm gonna get emotional, but like I just remember that moment, my eyes were just like, again, they were opened to the reality that God chose me and he never took his hand off of me. And I really was his child, and he really did say that, and I didn't lose that along the way. That mark was on my spirit, and that's what called me home every time, I did stray as a teenager and in my early adulthood, and all the stupid decisions you make as you know what I mean, as a young person. And I made lots of them. I'm no short on dumb decisions. And but in my back, like I really sincerely believe, like I was 8 years old and the Lord chose me. And it didn't always look like it, but he did. And I just remember like wanting to cry in that teaching like session and like wanting to flip the lights on and being so excited, like that charismatic comes out in you where you're just like, this is so exciting. I want to tell everybody about it. Like, oh my gosh, God chose me when I was 8 and he never stopped and he always pursued me. And yeah, I was so moved by it. And then that made me so excited for confirmation. I was like stoked. I'm like, oh yes, we're gonna go and I'm gonna receive like more of the Holy Spirit. And oh well, and then I basically like begged my priest from there to let me come into the church early because we had just like some of the priests in our diocese had just been moved around, so we just got a new priest who's like one of the best in our. I'm so grateful for him. He's a great guy. But he was like, well, usually people come in at the Easter Vigil, and I just like begged my RCIA director, like, I'm like, I will accept it if Father says no, but please, can I come in early? And he was very gracious to me, and he let me come in on the Solemnity of Christ the King right before Advent in 2023. So that was a long story, but
I love it. I love it so much. So remarkable. And the cool thing about the indelible mark that you were saying about baptism is now, as you get to share your story, I believe wholeheartedly that people that they may have gotten baptized at 8 or 10 or 12, you're going to help them get to that confirmation. You know what I mean? You're gonna
yes.
help those other folks they have that mark. They have the Trinitarian indelible mark, and
Hmm.
God uses people to reach them clearly. So there were so many questions that I completely forgot as I was captivated by that story. I think you told it very well. One thing is your older brother. What is his name, so that those that listen can pray for his soul?
His name is Fred.
Fred. Okay.
Hmm.
Yep. I'm sorry about your loss. I wanted to say
Thank you.
that. I also wanted to ask you, in those teenage years, you you were talking about how you were 15 and you had that moment at the oratory, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then you were saying that you felt there was a phrase you used where you felt something wasn't right, but you weren't ready to look at that. Do you know what I'm talking
Hmm.
about?
Yes. Yeah.
Do you remember consciously pushing thoughts away over these years? Like, in other words, being drawn very clearly and
Oh,
just saying,
yeah.
I'm not ready for that or I don't have the time? Did you have like a conscious decision each time that that would pop up?
I I think yes and no.
Okay.
So, um, yes, in the sense that like I definitely sensed that something wasn't right as far as why are we not all one? You know, where did our I remember a sense of like I'm gonna say it in my 16-year-old vernacular, but like where did the pictures go? That
Mm,
was like the feeling I had. You know what I mean? Like where did the pictures go? Where did the statues go? I'm not getting why it's a big deal to have a statue, which is nuts to think about as a Baptist. Like Baptists are so kind of pseudo-Gnostic in that way, right? Of like
sure.
you don't have the anything, nothing
Yeah.
physical, right?
Cut it out. Cut it all out.
Cut
Yeah.
it out. Yes, none of it. So, and but I do remember, I want to say yes, that I did intentionally push it away because again, it was the fear of the cultural the foreignness of it. You know what I mean? Like I'm a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid and like like there was really no I mean, I had some really wonderful Catholic coaches and teachers that were from the bottom of my heart like unbelievable people, but it didn't seem like anyone really cared if I was Catholic or not. Do you know what I mean? So then
Yeah.
I'm like, am I gonna be like this weird 16, 17-year-old kid who's like you know what I mean? Like uh here at church with other people and like, it just seemed like a like I said before, it just seemed like a cultural thing.
Yeah.
So I remember that was the main reason, honestly, like why I pushed it away was like, well, my family doesn't go to church there. And so, you know what I mean? Or like that seems really strange. Or like there was just a lot of that where even from many Catholics that I knew that were sincere and did practice their faith, but like they were just very much like, oh, your family does that and we do this sort of a
Yeah.
thing, which is cringe. It's a little cringy, but also like like kind of that a lot of Catholics are really, really open-minded too, which is a good thing, I guess. But I
Yeah.
just remember that was kind of it. Yeah.
But you're tapping into something that's really interesting for people to consider. When someone
Hmm.
converts, they will often look back at other family members or friends, and they'll get this vibe as if conversion is easy now that they are on the other
Mm.
side. and not
Yes.
thinking about the pressure, the peer pressure, the familial pressure that can go back for
Oh, yeah.
generations. This is not you just, oh, I wake up one day and I think I'll cross the Tiber. It takes a lot of prayer, takes a lot of
It
discernment,
does.
obviously a ton of grace, responding to the grace. So,
Yeah. I don't know
what?
if I told you
Go
the
ahead.
other. So after I was confirmed, like
Yeah.
my brother-in-law is a pastor. He's an
Okay.
evangelical missionary church pastor. I think they're switching denominations now, but I had a ton of pressure as soon as I converted. Like nobody cared I was doing RCIA. Like I didn't do it under a bush somewhere. I was very honest and so
Yeah.
excited. Sorry. And
Sure.
like so excited about like what I was doing and what I was learning and like the vibrancy of my faith and my prayer life at that time. And but kind of my life exploded after I was confirmed. It was like wild. I lost my job where I was working. I was working at a Christian school
Oh, wow.
and they were going through a process of like they were in the middle of rewriting their constitution to not have what Catholics and Eastern Orthodox would not be included as being able to like work there and stuff.
Okay.
So I was kind of caught in the crosshairs of that and I was fired, which was difficult and very embarrassing and all those things, right? But in the end, like I'm actually it's sometimes it's hard to say this. I have good days and bad days with it, but I can honestly say like that was a great like going through that was such a grace to me from the bottom of my heart. Like I don't know if I would say it every day. It's what a wonderful gift, Lord. Thank you. But like looking back on it, like I needed that, I needed that and just that opportunity, I think, to like to persevere in the face of a lot of difficulty. And for those people out there like that are facing incredible pressure for converting or thinking about it, like, just fix your eyes on Jesus and walk towards him, and yeah,
Yeah.
the reason you're being drawn to the mass is because that's where he is. He's
There you go.
there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say Saint Therese, everything is a grace. May not make
Yes.
sense, but I love that quote.
Hmm.
You need to write this story for the Journey Home, for the Coming Home Network. I'm telling you, unless you already did, for all I know.
I know I didn't.
Okay. Do you know about the Coming Home Network and the Journey Home?
Yes, I
Okay.
love them. I'm obsessed with their podcast. I love
Okay.
it.
You need to write everything you just shared. You need to write that and submit it.
Okay, I'll try.
100%. I am imploring you to do that, Carla.
Okay, I will.
And yeah, I have to go here in a few minutes. Is there anything else? And I thank you for staying up super late to
No
record this.
worries.
Is there anything else you
Oh,
want to leave the audience with, or anything you didn't have a chance to cover that you really wanted to?
um, hmm. I would say, well, my favorite thing about being Catholic is Eucharistic adoration and the Mass because that's where Jesus is like fully present to us and it's objective. Nobody can take it from you. There's no scandal that can take that from you. So I would say if you're on the fence or even if you're a Catholic, like struggling in your faith, not, you know, struggling in the community, whatever that is making it hard for you to stay in the church. Please, I'm imploring you, go to Eucharistic adoration and spend time with Jesus there. So that's all I will say.
Amen. Carla, what a blessing it was. Thank you so much. I'm going to rewatch this multiple times because you said a few things. It came in, I was like, oh, that's remarkable. And then it was gone. So I'm going to have to return to the episode several times. But thank you so much. Blessings to you, your children, your husband, the whole extended family. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank
You
you so
bet.
much for your time.
Yeah, you bet. Everyone, please share this episode. Until next time, take care and God bless you all.